All right.
All right, welcome back, History Buffs. Another episode, going in our second installment of the Civil War, or getting into the Civil War. If you haven't seen the first one, go back and watch. We talk about the Kansas-Nebraska Act, Bleeding Kansas, Dred Scott decision, and how that all kind of leads up to also the big one was the Lincoln-Douglas debates, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how all those things lead up to the election of 1860 and how after the election of 1860 is kind of a no going back. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. But first, we are joined by, as always, Austin from New London, R.A. Minahan, and the now famous podcast. Famous podcaster Ned Snark is going to be
That's right. The overexposed.
Yeah, he's getting a little too big for us. We originally wanted to film it go at 8, and he said, "No, I got 8:50. I got stuff to do."
Exactly.
Yeah,
I got a conference call, Dan.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah,
I got to do all aboard at 7. Yeah, and then I got Dan at 8:30. Yeah.
Yep.
So appreciate you kind of got to go on it.
Yeah, appreciate you carving out some time in your busy schedule, Ned, for being
anytime,
here.
anything for you guys.
Yep.
Oh, thanks.
And the election of 1860.
And the election of 1860. So, on the surface, might seem like another presidential election, but really nothing in the United States has been the same, honestly, ever since the election of 1860. So we'll talk about where that election kind of ranks in terms of that election versus the other however many presidential elections there's been in this country, and then connected to today a little bit as well. Obviously, there's an election less than 4 weeks away. So, quick background: election of 1860s, coming off the heels of the Lincoln-Douglas debates. That was in a couple years earlier in 1858. I think it goes into 1859 also. And in the election leading up to the election of 1860, you have 4 candidates. You have Abraham Lincoln with the newly formed Republican Party. I believe Ned, you said it's like 10 years old or something?
Yeah, like 1856. No, less than 10 years old.
Less than 10?
Like 4 or 5 years old. Yeah.
So very, very brand new Republican Party. John Breckinridge was the Southern Democrat candidate. And then you had Stephen Douglas from the Lincoln-Douglas debates was the just Democrat candidate. He got some of the votes from the northern states. Obviously, Breckinridge is going to get the southern vote. And then John Bell from the Constitutional Union Party, which obviously hasn't withstood the test of time like the other, like 2 of the other parties that I just named. So this was one of the most divided elections of all time, maybe the most divided election of all time. I know people say that every 4 years, or we were talking about that before, how the news says every 4 years this is the most divided or this is the most important election ever. This might have an argument for being the most important election ever. You had Lincoln not even on the ballot. The person who wins the election, obviously, is Abraham Lincoln. He's not even on the ballot in 10 southern states. If you look at the Electoral College map, actually, no, I don't think I can. But if you look at the Electoral College map, you have a split essentially right on the Mason-Dixon line. You have the South is green for the Southern Democrat Breckinridge, the North and going toward the Midwest, and even out California votes in this election, Oregon votes in this election. They all vote for Lincoln. The North votes for Lincoln. Right around the Mason-Dixon line with West Virginia, Tennessee, it looks like. They go for Bell, and then
it's like a weird buffer.
Douglas gets Missouri.
Yeah,
it looks like
Missouri, and three electoral votes from New Jersey, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. 12 electoral votes.
Yep, that's correct. So, so it is pretty split again. The Mason-Dixon line is divided a little bit between Douglas and Bell, but it's really the South is for Breckinridge, a Southern Democrat who's obviously pro-slavery, and the North is for the North and then into the Midwest, and even the West Coast. A couple states on the West Coast are
California.
For Lincoln.
Yep.
Lincoln wins, obviously, and the reason that's so important historically, aside from the fact that the Civil War starts and he abolishes slavery, Lincoln obviously anti-slavery. He wins, and it makes it clear to the southern states that we have no hope of keeping our way of life, our heritage with slavery. We can't keep this through the electoral process. We need another alternative to keep this, because all the southern states didn't. Lincoln wasn't even on the ballot. he still wins, and his viewpoints of getting rid of slavery obviously well known. He still wins, and if you're the South trying to maintain your way of life, you're thinking there's no way to go about this aside from seceding and starting your own country, and that's what basically starts to happen pretty much right thereafter. So, Ned, you want to start off? You want to jump in?
Sure. So I did some reading last night too. Going back on Dred Scott and dug into it a little deeper. And remember I was asking about the dissenting opinion from last week. So I found it and I read it, and the dissenting opinion, I can't recall the justice who wrote it, but he pretty much shredded Taney's argument on each level. And what I didn't realize that back then, unlike today, when the Supreme Court makes rulings, it's usually on a narrow scope of the law. But back then, in the antebellum before the Civil War, the justices would tend to rule on it as broad a possible definition of the law I'm not sure why, but I guess to make it more all-encompassing. So
I think that, sorry to cut you off, I think the purpose was the same as the reason the Constitution's left broad is so then it can get more narrow as needed over time.
So, okay.
Try to not set precedents that, if possible, so then you can return and then obviously narrow it down if needed.
Right.
I think, don't quote me on that, but I think it's similar to the way the Constitution was written.
But it makes sense. So it sounds right. So when Taney expanded upon just does Dred Scott have the right to freedom, since his owner, who was, by the way, in the military, I didn't know this either. He was a Union officer who was transferred from Missouri to Illinois and then up into Wisconsin, 2 free states. And when he got back, he was sold. The officer died. His wife sold him to someone else. And at that point is when Dred Scott and then his wife, Harriet, said, we should be free. And some abolitionists got a lawyer, the ACLU of its day, got a lawyer, and they took it all the way up to the Supreme Court, where Taney should have actually ruled that the court has no jurisdiction. This is a state's matter, and they could have ended this whole thing. But he saw an opening, and he was a segregationist, and he was pro-slavery because he blew it all out, including the Compromise of 1850, which was everyone agreed to. That's how the Union should now accept new territories on a slave or a non-slave basis.
Do you know where Taney was from?
Ooh, don't know.
Good, quick. I'll look it up. Keep going.
So in the run up in
Maryland,
he was from Maryland.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, when we look at the electoral map, is also interesting too. It's a mid-Atlantic northern state, but the Mason-Dixon line runs across its border with Pennsylvania. It really is a southern state in culture.
That's the most northern state that Breckinridge won. Yeah.
So once this came down, of course, it was celebrated in the South, saying, okay, now this is what they actually thought war would now be avoided, because they got what they've been asking for, which is them to decide the Constitution and the federal government should be protecting them to keep their slaves, which is what Taney pretty much said. The North, people in the North, the press in the North, especially in New York and Chicago, this is bullshit. Just ignore it. This is, you're free. And they started enacting laws, now local laws in each state, saying if once free, always free was the expression. So it was a pretty, that decision really, looking back after what we discussed, it wasn't so much the debates and coming down on who you believe in the debates. It was the Dred Scott decision. That was the fuse that lit the bomb that started the Civil War.
Right. And the Lincoln debates were kind of like the microcosm for what was going on in the rest of the country. The Supreme Court was, national news, what's going on.
Yeah. So when we looked at Lincoln and last week we said like Lincoln was the Barack Obama of his day, it's even more so, because I was thinking about that as well. So, and RA, you guys probably know better than I do. We've always read that Lincoln wasn't anti-slavery; he was anti-expansion of slavery.
Yeah. So the Republican platform that during the election of 1860 was just not to expand slavery like westward, as new states, new territories became admitted into the Union. They said nothing about ending slavery completely.
But they did have abolitionists within the Republican Party.
I mean, there was abolitionists, sure, but their party platform, what Lincoln ran on was not, hey, we're getting rid of slavery. It was just, we don't want slavery expanded.
Right, but as a Southern Democrat, knowing how the Electoral College works, eventually that would happen anyway. Like,
Correct.
not expanding means it's only in this area that it is now. Obviously, the country's going to continue to grow with more states being added. It was, I think,
But then
at that point, it was only a
why
matter of
now?
time.
Like why was this so pivotal? Why did they decide to secede? After Lincoln, even though like he didn't, I would assume that if say in 1864 someone ran saying, "Oh, we're getting rid of slavery," then they would have done it. But Lincoln never said we're getting rid of slavery. So what was the tipping point?
I see what you're saying. Go ahead, Netta. Go ahead.
No, what I was working towards was, how we now, I guess we've always done it, but it seems more now that we apply ulterior motives to public figures and to candidates. Yeah, he says he's this, but he's really going to take your guns.
I'm sure that was happening. But yeah,
so I think in the South they were saying, right, in the South, I think they were probably saying, yeah, he says he's not an abolitionist, but he's surrounded by abolitionists.
He's only saying that to get elected.
And then he's going to free the slave, and and he could have pushed.
And I mean, they were right.
They were right by 18.
But it was 2020. They were correct.
Yes, yeah. and in a sense, but we don't really know, right? We don't know if I've never read a journal or diary or Lincoln didn't write this memoir.
Well, the South didn't give much of a choice to do it on his own or not.
Yeah, but he's the one who drew the line. He drew the line in the sand. Was it in July of 1862 or something? If we're going to emancipate the slaves January 1st, 1863, right?
Well, but I mean, as soon as the South
started,
as soon as the Southern states started to secede, at that point it's like, well, shit. I mean,
well, his idea was
then we're going to do it our way, and then when you come, and then towards the end, when you come back, it's going to be our way.
Yeah, he didn't, when he assumed office or when he was running for election, he realized that it was going to be a powder keg. The thing I also thought was interesting back then too was Breckinridge and Lincoln were what they called front porch candidates. They did not leave their residence; they stayed and had others do their campaigning. While
Biden.
Oh, wait a minute. Well, while the other two were actively campaigning, Stephen Douglas was actually going and doing orations around the country, trying to get elected. So Lincoln's instruction was do not to his I guess his advanced team or whatever, do not say anything confrontational or disagreeable with any of the other the other northern affiliated parties. In other words, don't give them any reason for us to split up either. So we need to stay unified, and that's how he did it. He held the fledgling party together while the Democrats split, geographically, and that constitutional party was really just trying to hold things together as they were, and there was no going back. Go ahead. Sorry,
I was going to say, going back to what RA said, why now for the South to secede? I was just looking at the Electoral College map, and if the trend was going to continue, it seemed like the Republicans were probably going to win the next several elections just because the northern states had significantly more electoral votes just within their states.
Yep.
And so if Republicans kept winning over and over again, eventually an abolitionist would probably be elected. And not for nothing, the South was one of the only places in the world left that was really had slavery at that point, right? So I mean,
no, that's a good point. Even Britain, who they were trying to turn to for support during the war, they got rid of it.
Early 1800s, they got rid of
it. Shortly after the Revolutionary War, they got rid of it. And then, I think at that point it was like, well, it's now or never. This is our best opportunity to do this. It's going to be inevitable that they're going to try to take this away from us. So we have an opportunity now. We might as well take it.
Well, you know what? You can spin it too, Austin, because the South thought that the mills and Leeds in the Midlands of the UK would starve without their cotton. Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, they were in Northern Ireland. They started making They started making the other stuff. What's the linen? They started mass producing linen. Mm-hmm. So they didn't really miss cotton. They did for a while. And besides, Queen Victoria was not going to allow her country to recognize the South as the Confederate States as an independent nation if they had slaves. Mm-hmm. So even if the businessmen said, "Hey, we'll do business with anyone. We'll make sure, fine."
Right.
They found an alternative, and the Queen said, "No, we're not going to do it." Mm-hmm. So they were screwed. Also, when you look at it too, I'm looking at the electoral map as well. New York had 35 electoral votes.
And then Pennsylvania had 27.
Right. All you need to do is win those 2 states.
Yeah,
And-
seriously.
That's like even today, you only have to win 13 states.
Correct.
Mhm.
Correct.
Electoral
should be-
college is a little flawed.
Yeah. It should be more
You
evenly
want, you want
balanced.
popular vote, all right?
What?
You want popular vote?
Yeah. I
Really?
don't know. Why not?
That's a different discussion. but
Electoral college doesn't work.
What
If
if it was-
if you have
more
the
balanced, it
majority,
would.
if you have the majority of the population of people voting for someone, why shouldn't that person win?
because the majority of people are morons.
Well, that also goes. The Electoral College harkens back to having just what we talked about last week in Illinois, where they had their congressional representatives voting for a senator. You and I, none of us here could vote for Lincoln or Douglas. So it's kind of like, why we're not good enough to vote, really? So there is a point to
I mean,
RA's.
I'm not arguing that most people are idiots, but I don't know. I just
think it helps represent a larger majority of Americans in terms of their viewpoint.
Problem is you get
if you were
super
in
delegates, though.
Wyoming,
That's the
if you were in Wyoming, your vote counts 3 times more than someone in California's.
Should it count less though? Because if someone in Wyoming,
No, they should be equal. Every person should have 1 vote.
But I don't think the popular vote would do that though, because then you're only going to
Wyoming has
because you're going to cater to New York and California. You're not
California's at 55.
Yeah. Well, population disparity.
Yeah.
What about you just get rid of the winner take all aspect of the Electoral College? So like whoever wins the popular vote in that state gets all the Electoral College votes. Instead, you split it up evenly like Maine does.
Oh, Maine is. Oh.
I don't hate that by county.
Oh
yeah,
my God!
My caucuses.
Have you guys ever
that'd be
been
tough.
to a caucus?
That'd be tough for the.
Do you do it by that'd be or even just by congressional districts?
I think it would be by
mess.
It would be by congressional districts. It would be tough, but you would have Republicans campaigning in some places in California because there are Republicans in California, and then you'd have them also campaigning in New York. But
again, that's also tough though, because then you're only talking to that's a state thing though. Like it's a national election, so now you're campaigning to part of a state. That seems a little.
But they don't campaign there at all. Is my point.
Right
at this point.
Yeah.
So then they would campaign there potentially.
I would say a fairer or more balanced electoral college might be a solution. First of all, I miss the excitement. You're like you said, all right, by the time you go to 8 p.m., polls closing at 8 p.m., the election could be over, right? Definitely by 9. 2016 was a fluke, was an anomaly, right?
Yeah.
And 2000 was also one. But, I think you guys, I
don't
know what you're doing.
By the way.
This could be too.
This election's also going to definitely.
It's going to drag on. It's going to be.
Well,
It's drag on for a long time.
Florida votes, early voting opens on the 13th, and you have to get your mail-in ballots have to be postmarked to be counted in the mail before the 23rd of October, I think.
There's going to be.
Really?
There's going to be no wait. There'll be no waiting on Florida this time.
Well, that's good. At least some states have it. It has to be postmarked on election day.
On election day, right?
It's going to be a
it's a little
clusterfuck with
ridiculous.
mail-in voting.
Yeah.
Did they have mail-in voting in 1860?
What a transition. We got a little off the road, but I let it go. I think
on track.
I think it's a good conversation. I don't know.
Sorry, the commie bastard wants
Yeah,
to dissolve the electoral college.
It wants my vote to count just as much as Ned's vote. Yeah,
my
my
vote to be
bad.
the same. How dare you? Yeah.
No, I do.
Equality.
Yeah.
I don't like the idea of these super delegates, and all that, because then it sounds like power is residing with the few.
Well, it is.
But the electoral college should be at least made more balanced, so it's more interesting, just from an election standpoint and a fairness standpoint. I hate it that it's over. It should be counted. We should have the election. You shouldn't know until Hawaii checks in. I mean, in all seriousness.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the Electoral College now, because the Electoral College of 1860, that's how the southern states felt. They felt like they had no chance because of the, all the votes that Lincoln got just in the North alone. And if Lincoln was running on not expanding slavery, that means their little pocket was just going to stay their little pocket. They wouldn't get the rights and protections for slavery like they were hoping for. So pretty immediately after the election of 1860, you see southern states start to secede from the Union, basically meaning they remove themselves. They say we are no longer part of the United States of America. We're going to go start our own thing. the Confederacy. What was the official name of the Confederacy?
Confederate States of America.
That's what I wanted to say, but I didn't. I thought they'd be more original than that.
Nope.
But yeah, so they go and start the Confederate States of America, and really the rest is history, as they say. Now, I forget, it was R.A. or Ned had an interesting little tidbit about Lincoln post-election pre-inauguration.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about that, I thought, next week. But after the election, there was like some sort of Lincoln's life was threatened. And I think this was R.A. Did they have the Pinkertons? They didn't have the Secret Service, but they had Pinkerton guards.
They had Pinkertons, yeah, like in Red Dead Redemption 2.
Yeah. So they didn't have them.
Those who play Red Dead Redemption 2 out there.
So
like opposite my play.
So they assigned the Pinkertons to guard to bring Lincoln in. He came in from Illinois through Baltimore and then to Washington. And of course there was still a Congress, there was still a Senate, so Abraham Lincoln was inducted. What? I missed that one.
The Wrestling Hall of Fame in 1994.
Oh, there we go.
That's an actual fact.
It's an actual fact.
I will never forget that because I got that question wrong.
So they smuggled them into Washington.
Really? That's an actual fact?
It's an actual fact. I'm not. Yeah, that's the first real fact.
All right, these youngsters don't watch any other shows. That was a question on Drinking Buddies.
I got that question.
I watch Drinking Buddies. I love Drinking Buddies.
Famously got that question wrong.
So they smuggled him in, and of course he was derided by the Southerners as saying he was smuggled in dressed as a woman. But in reality, because of his 6'5" frame, he was instantly recognizable. So he did wear like a shawl around his neck or covering his head so his features wouldn't be that recognizable.
Interesting.
But yeah, there were assassination attempts on him. So
yeah.
Or I should say not attempts,
including a successful one.
Yeah, including one that worked.
Yeah.
The last one, yes.
Shooters shoot.
Other than that, Ms. Lincoln, did you enjoy the play?
The great Macarano says, shooters shoot, yes. So that's a good little tease for next week. We'll get into more of how the process of the state seceding, and then the first couple of battles. I think we can get at least Fort Sumner. We'll get into that a little bit next week as well. But the question I want to talk about or ask you is, with the election of 1860 and how contested and controversial, and obviously the consequence of it, right? All right, the consequence of the election of 1860, the consequence of election of 1860, obviously being self-seceding, leading directly to the Civil War, leading directly to the end of slavery with the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, Gettysburg Address, the whole thing. Has that been the most consequential election in U.S. history? Is there another one we can think of? Has that been the most consequential election in U.S. history? What do we think?
I think that was definitely the most consequential election of U.S. history. I think one, because
if you steal my idea, by the way, I'm gonna lose my goddamn mind. I see you grinning already. I just want to say it right now. Steal my idea again.
I'll let you go before me.
No.
You should. Katie, I'll go because he's gonna say Gutenberg, the movable press.
I've got a good one.
Not only was the country so polarized, we've clearly never been more polarized than that because half the country seceded. But also, just I think geography plays the biggest role in that. Is the fact that it was so easy for them to secede because the country was split in half. Like, even if you say during the civil rights movement or this year, the country is as polarized as it was back then, at the election point, everything's too mixed together that you couldn't actually have the country split up like they did during the 1860 election. So I think that's why it's the most consequential. It's because it was so easy for it, the country to just split in half.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a map, it literally is split in half. Exactly. North and the south, as it's described, obviously. Ned, what do you think?
I do, because I think there's only been one Democratic president for the Democratic Party until Woodrow Wilson, and that was Grover Cleveland. So not only was it the immediate results were the Civil War and devastating, war to bring the country back together, but the Republican Party lost one election. I think two. I think Cleveland won twice, two separate terms.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you think about from 1860. Yep. From 1860 to 1912. Right.
Johnson. He wasn't elected. Yeah.
No, he wasn't elected.
Yeah.
Right. They only elected one person for 2 separate terms as a Democrat. So it was huge. It structured the Republican Party in this country forever.
Do you want to say it or should I say it?
Nope. Go ahead, RA.
So mine is, I would say, if it's not the most important, I would say the election of 1788.
Thank God. Okay. Nope.
I
Good.
was
Good.
gonna,
Go ahead.
oh,
Go ahead.
oh, what did you have?
No. Go ahead. Let's hear it.
I was going to say the election of 1788 because it set the precedent for the entire country. You know, it got the wheel turning. It was the very first, you got to pick Washington. It was unanimous.
It was a foregone conclusion, though.
Right.
I know that, but had they gone with someone else, the course of the entire country could have changed.
Now,
It's a huge what if, but
No.
Go ahead, Austin.
I was going to say, would you not think that
He's gonna do it. I'm gonna go. Quiet, shut up. I'm gonna go.
I'm way more interested in what Katie.
It's the election of 1800. That's the one I think.
It's a good one.
Of. That's the transition. So it was Washington was first. He has 2 terms, and then Adams, his VP, becomes president, and then he runs against Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
Thomas Jefferson of the opposing party wins, and the transition of power from one political ideology or one political viewpoint to another, the peaceful transition of power that has been a staple of American democracy for over 200 years now, that to me is the most consequential election of so far in U.S. history because it sets the precedent for
set
everything.
the precedent in the first one.
No.
No.
Yes.
Both wrong. Nope. Wrong.
How did that set the precedent?
Because you're the first one to do it. Of course, it's
The
the precedent.
hero of the Revolutionary War won the election.
It was a foregone
You didn't need an
conclusion.
election. You could have appointed him. You didn't need an election.
If you were going to bet on anyone else, you would have lost all your
No,
I'm just saying they could have elected someone else. They could.
Something else, I think, Katie, you got a good point. But when it is 1860 was the most important. The second one, though, I thought was 1828 because to your point, you had either people from Virginia, proteges of one, or people from Massachusetts for the first 6 presidents.
Yep.
And when
Virginia
Andrew
Dynasty,
Jackson, yep, because you had how many successors,
Hickory.
handpicked successors to Jefferson.
And he got
He had
screwed.
Madison, Monroe.
Jefferson, Madison, and
Yep. And he should have won in 1824. He did get screwed, but he
Got
won
screwed by
on his
Henry
own
Clay.
in 1828.
yeah.
And that was he was the first president elected who was born in the Appalachian Mountains, like outside of the original. He was born. He wasn't born
in North Carolina.
He was born in North Carolina. So, but he was the one first not born in Virginia and part of the Eastern establishment, as it was even called back then. So, granted, he was a war hero, but he changed everything. His election opened it up more than Jefferson's did. And then, of course, he had a handpicked successor too. So,
yeah. Austin, you still had any thoughts after?
I was going to say, like Washington not running for a 3rd term. I thought that could have been a very important election also. Because, I mean, like, if he wanted to, he probably could have set up a monarchy. The American people adored him, and he could have just kept appointing his people after, and he could have just kept running.
Yeah,
but
not a lot of people know. Go ahead.
He set the precedent that you run for 2 terms, and after 2 terms, you're done. Like, that wasn't a law until after World War II.
Yeah.
During World War II.
Yeah, not a lot of people know that actually that two-term limit wasn't actually a limit at all until FDR got 4 terms.
Pushed it too far.
Yep. And then after that,
get a war to win. I don't blame him.
Yeah. Well, that was one of my second choice was going to be the election of 1940 when he ran for a 3rd term because it was now. Do you change horses in midstream? The war's about to start. I don't know. I don't know if I was.
That's also not a bad one because you could say war is inevitable. Like looking back, you could say war is inevitable, and that is pretty consequential. We said using everything we know now, that's pretty consequential. Obviously, knowing that's why he ran. But in 1940, you can have a feeling war is going to start, but you don't know. You still don't know.
Right.
But a lot of isolationists, and he's still communicating with Churchill all throughout 1940.
Right.
And he's basically saying, I can't do anything until we're elected. So if you had, who did he run against? Shit.
That's what I was going to say. All right. A bunch of shit candidates.
Yeah.
Who's 32, 36, 40, and 44. The Republicans threw up crap to beat him. And there was even though he was, he led us through World War II.
They also didn't have much to run on.
Wilkie?
But Wendell Wilkie was one of them. And 40 might have been Wilkie in 40.
Thinking.
Gotcha.
It was Wendell Wilkie.
There you go.
But he could have if
Yeah.
you know he was isolationist, I believe. So he could have. I mean, I know FDR said he was isolationist too, but he
boy.
was
I don't think he was.
Talk about a route, by the way.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
449 to 82.
Well, interestingly, Theodore was made president through assassination. So he succeeded the office in like 1901, right after McKinley was elected in 1900.
Mm-hmm.
He served almost 4 full years, 3 years and 10 months, I think, of a term, then won in his own right in 1904. And then because he didn't want, I remember reading this in his biography, they asked him the night he won election, would you run a third term? And he said, no one's served a third term. And his daughter, Alice, said, but you weren't elected twice. And he's like, I won't do that. Right. Washington only served 2. I'm only going to serve 2.
So that's also a great segue. Yes, he came back. Bull Moose Party, baby. We'll do that at some point too. We'll do a Teddy Roosevelt one at some point too. But that's a great segue actually, because some people are speculating that could happen with, if Biden and Harris win this election, you could see Biden serve for a year or 2 and then steps down. Harris comes in. Well, she hasn't been elected yet, so theoretically she could serve 10 or 11 years. 3 terms, which just puts another kind of wrinkle into this election we have. So my final question is, in terms of the election of 2020, obviously we don't know, we can't look back on it like we can the other elections, but where do we think this election is going to stand historically in terms of consequential? Is this just another one of those, every 4 years the media gets both sides riled up saying it's the most important election ever? Is it actually the most important election ever, or the most important election since maybe the one we just talked about, or is it somewhere in the middle? I'll go.
Austin,
go ahead.
Yeah. I think it's pretty far up there. I think it's definitely the most important election of the 21st century. I think we're in the middle of a major culture war in our country, and I think that this election could really change the tide of what direction we go in for that. So regardless of what side of it you're on, I think whoever wins this election will decide the direction that the country goes culturally for the next 4 years, and then we'll see beyond that.
Now, you think decided though? Because I think even if Trump wins, it's not going to. I feel like the way the culture's going has already kind of been decided. At least the social media has. From what we see on Twitter, it looks like it has.
Yeah, but what is it? Only what? It's less than
20%. 7 or 8% of the world, or something.
Well, it's like less than 20% of Americans are on Twitter. So, yes, all the media elites and business elites are on Twitter, but the majority of Americans aren't on Twitter. So, if you ask everyday people about, I'm really into the whole critical race theory shit. And so I talk to people about it, and they're like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I'm like, yeah, but you're going to find out about it soon. Especially
you're going to learn about it, or in 20 years, your kids are going to learn about it.
Exactly. If the Democrats win, you're definitely going to hear about it. So I think things like that will definitely be decided, or at least heavily influenced by this election.
Ned, you got something?
I think that when you look back in the history of civilizations, doesn't matter where, doesn't matter when, the more they never last, they never peak for very long. Even the strongest civilization tends to become, and I'll say liberal, but more open when they leave and expand their boundaries and their borders to encompass more diverse, different people, whether they're tribes of Visigoths or the Huns,
Rome, right?
Or the Huns.
Rome's a perfect example for it.
We all think Genghis Khan was great, and he established a dynasty. 3 generations. Grandson lost it. So they don't last, because once a people such as Americans become more diverse and unchallenged, by the way,
right,
they will tend to be moved to a more liberal and open society. And whether that's good or bad, it's fine, but it doesn't stay the way it is. So conservatism and I don't mean in the United States, it would happen in Britain, it happened in France, it happened in Japan. There will always be on the retreat as civilizations grow more intelligent and grow more broad. The difference is now is while every Toby.
Go ahead.
Does Toby know what I was saying? Oh my God. When well, we're gonna lose RA.
He muted himself.
Actually, this might be more entertaining. Now I lost my train of thought. But every culture and every civilization requires an element of artists, or Native American tribes had the shaman, those who are more in tune with the feelings and the spirits around the civilization, and they can reflect civilization, mock civilization, bring it to new heights through artistic work, but they've never run a civilization. And media has allowed because those people are very damaged. Sorry, but they are. Michelangelo, give me an artist. Picasso, damaged.
Raphael.
Mozart, damaged.
Yeah.
So now you've got a group of people who are creative, who are reflective, who are sometimes they're introspective, sometimes they're not because of their insecurity. They shouldn't be the center of culture. They should be on the fringe of culture
And pushing
and
it
now,
forward.
Media has allowed like the narcissism of celebrities to run the country, to run the world.
No, you're saying that naked voting ad that they all pushed out yesterday was
you saw that, right? Exactly.
Bad idea.
Oh, hell yeah.
Why would they do that? Because they're not in front of a camera anymore, because they're all under quarantine, which they've wished for. So they have to express themselves because they need adulation, the applause of the people.
Is this the quarantine Renaissance art that everyone was speculating was going to happen?
Yeah, right.
In the spring, right?
So basically what I'm saying is this election, I just think it's just a natural progression. I don't think it's going to be that overly consequential. If Trump wins, then the left has stopped temporarily, but behind the scenes, the ground is crumbling.
Yeah, I mean, it's something you see. You can just obviously look back over time. It's what was the music like 100 years ago? What was the clothing being worn like 100 years ago? The dancing styles, right? That's all those things have progressed and changed over time. Have progressed in the word is going to get more liberal. Like liberal is another name for liberal is progressive. As a society progresses, you're going to see that more and more. It's tough to find a balance of upholding more I guess call them traditional. Maybe some might call them conservative values, while at the same time moving society forward. It's tough. I think America has done a pretty decent job of that as a country, but you're right. I mean, it's tough to find it. It's tough to keep it at bay, right? I think that's what you meant. Kind of like the floor was crumbling a little bit. Right. It's tough to keep that from happening.
And it's annoying. The only thing I'm annoyed at is, and it does, you're entitled constitutionally to free speech, right? That's fine, and you should be. But do you have to say fuck all the time? Yes, I have the right to say. The Constitution guarantees me freedom of speech. I can say, Toby.
He doesn't like the word.
Ari just said it right there. He just said fuck.
He did.
But if I had used that word, or let's put it this way, I never heard my father say that word until I'd say 10 years ago. I never heard my grandfather ever say that word. So it's awesome. He's awesome. He doesn't look very happy though.
No, I don't think he likes me now.
He doesn't look very happy, RA. Oh, he's on.
No, I'm not thrilled.
No.
Not thrilled with my dog.
Toby, your thoughts on this election coming up?
Toby,
where does it rank in terms of?
Oh, Joe, look at him.
He's a little shy.
Yeah, you suck. All right. Anyways.
All right, you got anything about where this
it's nothing important. It's nothing big. It is not comparable to 1860, 1800. We're not on the verge of world war. We're on the verge of secession. This is just the media's overdoing this because they're bored. We're in quarantine. Mm-hmm. This will go down in history just like the 2012 election or the 1992 election.
It might be. I don't know about that though. It might be a little more noteworthy though. Just because of coronavirus alone, I think it's going to be more noteworthy.
In that case,
but the thing is, like you will have, you'll have like the big thing of the year isn't going to be the election. God damn it!
Right.
The big thing is going to. You're a mess. The big thing is going to be coronavirus this year. When people think of 2020, they think of coronavirus. They're not going to think of the election.
Yeah,
that's all I got. That's all I got.
My dog's growling.
I think you're right.
Fucking dog across the street. My God.
Yeah, I mean,
the interesting thing will be you two, because you're much younger than I am, and in 25 years I'll be dead. But you guys will be wondering when you're like 50 or pushing 50, you'll be like, Jesus Christ, have we changed since we thought 2020 was rough? Oof.
Yeah.
That's what I feel like from now on. It's just
But
going
at
to be
some
like, oh,
point that has to
2024 is
stop,
going to be
though, right?
terrible. You know, we're on the verge of war. It's nonsense.
Like at some point, how much farther? I guess I'm sure people 100 years ago were saying this, but how much farther as a society can you go before it devolves into chaos? We're seeing chaos right now in different parts of the country. At what point
look at the British? Look at the disintegration of the British Empire. I mean, they had riots too. They had labor riots in the 50s, post World War II. They were broke, and they were 50 years older. They were the greatest empire the world had ever seen, and they were a tiny fucking island with a huge navy that turned out to be not as resolute as they had thought, and they couldn't defend their colonies and possessions across the world. Remember, what was it? The sun never set on the British. The sun doesn't set.
Yeah, the sun never set on the British Empire.
But by 1950. They were riots in the streets in Leeds and Liverpool, London.
Yep.
By 1950, they'd lost a ton of their colonies.
No, I understand.
Not in Africa really, but yeah, I mean they pretty much World War I kind of put them in their place, and then World War II just kind of legitimized what everyone was kind of thinking was they're no longer the preeminent power in the world.
Well, World War I broke them mentally because they did not expect the massive losses of entire generation wiped out, and the U.S. kind of escaped that because we got in late. And that led them to hesitate in World War II, even though we all, you saw Churchill and you heard, the speeches and they did a great job. They held up against the Germans. That's for goddamn sure. But, Churchill advocated against the Normandy beach landings. He wanted to go to the soft underbelly of the Mediterranean.
The soft underbelly of Europe, which was Italy.
Because he did not want to send British boys again to die in France being slaughtered by Germans, because he saw it in World War I. So that's how, if you want to look at what could happen to the United States, you can look at the disintegration of the British Empire. 50 years. Ours is just happening faster because technology is faster.
Yep. And I took a 20th century European history class in college, which was pretty, a lot of primary source stuff, real interesting. And one of the big takeaways of the post World War II era in Europe, but definitely in Britain, is a lot of the civilians were like, enough. We need something here. Give us a little, basically saying almost welcoming the socialism.
I said that was a big reason why, because Churchill wanted more war. He was like, we got to go after communism now.
Yeah, Churchill voted out right
afterward, and then the Labor Party came into power, and they're like, listen, we just need to rebuild us. We got to focus on us for a little bit.
Yeah, he was voted.
One of the big reasons why he got voted out of power.
Right in the middle of victory. Right over the spring or summer, right after.
July,
46.
He was in Potsdam. He was at Potsdam, and then they replaced him. In the middle of it. He got called back during. So that was July of 45.
40. That was 45. Summer 45.
Blows my mind.
He was very hurt by that.
Right in the middle of settling down and dividing up the spoils, he's pulled out of there. Weird. So strange.
Yeah.
They needed. The UK needed some me time at that point.
I think so.
And I know, again, per usual, get off the rails at the end, but you can always draw connections to where we started and where we finished, and that's something that I don't know if you can say about every show.
We pride ourselves.
I appreciate it.
And we had a dog. And we had a dog too. So
we got our fifth co-host joining the show today. But as always, gentlemen, I thought it was a pleasure. Good discussion. A little spirited debate on the election of 1860. We'll continue with this Civil War talk, get into the the secession of the South, and then the Fort Sumner in the first couple battles of the Civil War next week as we get closer to Election Day. Looking forward to it.
Slaves and arrogance.